What makes some cases stay with people is not only what is known. It is the feeling that something important is still just out of reach. A case can have a timeline, public appeals, surveillance material, forensic testing, and national attention, and still remain painfully unresolved. That is where the Nancy Guthrie case stands right now. Authorities have said Nancy Guthrie, who is 84 years old, was taken from her Tucson area home in the early hours of February 1st, 2026. The FBI has described her as a vulnerable adult who needs daily medication for a heart condition and has difficulty walking. The agency has offered a reward for information leading to her recovery or the arrest and conviction of anyone involved in her disappearance. Those facts alone explain why this case immediately drew intense concern and why that concern has not faded. From the beginning, this case carried an urgency that was impossible to ignore. According to widely reported details, Nancy had dinner with family on January 31st and returned home that night. Investigators later said they believed she was taken in the early hours of the next morning. Public reporting has described a sequence that continues to shape how people think about this case. Her front door camera disconnected at 1:47 a.m. The software later detected a person on camera at 2:12 a.m. Her pacemaker app disconnected from her phone at 2:28 a.m. Family members later went to the house, realized something was wrong, and called 911 shortly after noon. That sequence does not answer every question, but it does something just as powerful. It creates a narrow window in which everything seems to change. And when a case has a window like that, people keep returning to it, hoping that one overlooked detail may eventually explain the whole story. The public also learned early on that investigators released footage showing an individual appearing to tamper with the front door camera. That detail matters because it instantly gave the case a visible point of focus. It turned a feared disappearance into something even more concrete. It suggested activity at the home during the same period investigators now consider critical. It also intensified public expectation. When people hear that a camera was interfered with, they naturally assume an answer must be close behind. But real investigations do not always move in the order the public expects. A case can contain alarming facts and still take time to interpret. It can have visible signs and still require months of patient forensic work before those signs can be connected to a reliable public conclusion. That gap between what looks obvious and what can actually be proved is one of the reasons this case continues to feel so heavy. There is another reason this story has remained so emotionally powerful. Nancy Guthrie is not simply a name in a local headline. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, and that has brought national attention to a case that would already have been serious under any circumstances. Savannah has spoken publicly about how disturbing the scene at the home appeared to the family. Major reporting described back doors propped open, a Nancy's phone and purse still inside, and blood on the front doorstep. Those details are difficult to hear, but they are part of the official reporting that made clear to the family and to authorities that this was not treated as an ordinary missing person situation. The Associated Press reported that authorities believe Nancy was taken against her will. That statement matters. It frames the seriousness of the investigation without going beyond what officials have actually said. And yet, despite all of that, the public still does not have the one answer people usually expect after so much time and attention. As CBS reported, investigators had not publicly named a suspect or person of interest. That absence has become one of the most defining features of the case. Not because it means nothing is happening, but because it creates a tension that is difficult for viewers to sit with. There is enough evidence to know this case is serious. There is enough reporting to know investigators have been working multiple angles. There is enough public urgency to understand why the family continues to plead for answers. But there is not enough publicly confirmed information to say who is responsible. That is the exact kind of unresolved space where speculation usually grows fastest. It is also the exact place where responsible storytelling has to slow down and stay very close to what has actually been verified. That is why the discussion around DNA has become so important. In a case with no publicly identified suspect, any reference to forensic evidence immediately carries more weight. People hear the words DNA evidence and assume the investigation must be close to a breakthrough. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it does not. What CBS reported is more nuanced and, in many ways, more revealing. Investigators turned to forensic genetic genealogy as they tried to make the most of potential DNA evidence collected during the search. At the same time, sources close to the investigation said there was concern that some of the DNA collected might not immediately provide a usable profile for standard comparison. Another law enforcement source said even a low-level sample can sometimes be enhanced in the lab, though it may take longer. That combination is incredibly important because it tells the public two things at once. First, the DNA may still matter a great deal. Second, the process of making it useful may be far more technical and time-consuming than people assume. This is where many viewers start asking the same question. What does forensic genetic genealogy actually do? The simplest answer is that it gives investigators another route when the most obvious route does not immediately produce a name. Traditional law enforcement DNA matching often begins with direct comparison. Is this profile already in a law enforcement database? Does it match someone whose DNA is lawfully available for that purpose? Genetic genealogy works differently. It can, under the proper legal and procedural framework, help investigators look for biological relationships that might point toward relatives and family branches, even when the exact person behind the DNA has never appeared in a criminal database. That does not mean instant identification. It does not mean the case is solved. It means the investigation may still be moving forward through a quieter, more technical, but potentially very significant process. And this is exactly why the current stage of the Nancy Guthrie case feels so tense. From the outside, the case can appear still. There are no dramatic public announcements. There is no publicly named suspect. There is no official statement saying that investigators have reached a final conclusion. But underneath that quiet surface, the work may be entering the phase that matters most. Because once evidence moves into advanced analysis, the case can begin changing in ways the public does not see right away. A lab does not create suspense in the way a press conference does. A genealogical lead does not look dramatic while it is being built. But those quiet phases can be the ones that reshape the entire investigation. Part of what makes this case so difficult to stop thinking about is how clearly it sits between urgency and uncertainty. The urgency is obvious. Nancy was described by the FBI as a vulnerable adult. She needs medication. Her family has spoken publicly about the pain of not knowing where she is. Rewards have been offered. The case has been treated as one of the most significant active missing person investigations in the country. The uncertainty is just as obvious. Authorities have not publicly identified a suspect. The public does not know the full weight of every piece of evidence collected. The exact value of the DNA evidence has not been announced in a final way. And so the case remains suspended between what is frighteningly clear and what is still unknown. That suspended feeling is what keeps the public returning to the same question again and again. What really changes a case like this? Is it a witness? Is it a surveillance image? Is it a digital record? Is it a lab result? The honest answer is that any of those could matter. But when investigators reportedly turn to forensic genetic genealogy, it signals something specific. It suggests they are trying to extract identity from evidence that has not yet produced a straightforward public answer. In other words, they are not just looking at what happened. They are trying to understand who may have been present and whether biology can help narrow that question in ways ordinary comparison cannot. Or there is a strong temptation in a case like this to fill the silence with certainty. That temptation is exactly what a policy-safe and monetization-safe script must resist. The goal is not to make the case sound bigger than it already is. The goal is to tell the truth about why it already matters so much. Officials have said Nancy Guthrie was taken against her will. The FBI has released relevant footage and reward information. Major outlets have reported a critical overnight timeline. CBS has reported that forensic genetic genealogy is being used as one investigative avenue for DNA leads. Those facts are already serious enough. They create natural tension without the need to accuse anyone who has not been publicly charged. They create suspense without the need to invent motives. They create emotional weight without the need to describe graphic details or use sensational language that could put monetization at risk. YouTube's advertiser-friendly guidelines are clear that context matters, especially for crime and sensitive topics. The platform says that when violent or disturbing events are covered in a news, educational, artistic, or documentary context, that context is important to whether content can be monetized. The same guidance warns against making the focal point blood, injury, or shock without context. That distinction matters here. A responsible video about the Nancy Guthrie case should focus on verified facts, timeline, investigation, public appeals, and forensic process. It should not use graphic imagery. It should not use thumbnails or titles that imply guilt without proof. It should not turn one case into repetitive, low-value content with no original narration or analysis, because YouTube's monetization policies also emphasize original, authentic content rather than repetitive or mass-produced material. That is why the safest approach is not only what you say, but how you frame it. The public often underestimates how much careful work can exist behind an apparently quiet investigation. A timeline may be clear while identity remains unresolved. A surveillance image may be useful without being enough. A sample may exist without being ready for the kind of comparison the public imagines. Genetic genealogy can take time because it is not simply pressing a button and waiting for a name to appear. It can require extracting a usable profile, determining whether that profile is strong enough, lawfully comparing it where permitted, building family trees, excluding irrelevant branches, and then testing whether any emerging lead truly fits the rest of the evidence. Every step matters, and every step can add time. That does not make the process weak. In many cases, it is exactly what makes the process more reliable. This is why the phrase, "answers could come any day," has to be understood the right way. It does not mean an announcement is guaranteed tomorrow. It does not mean investigators have already solved the case and are simply waiting to go public. What it means, when used responsibly, is that once a case enters a phase where advanced forensic work is underway, the next major shift can sometimes happen without much warning. A case can feel quiet for weeks and then change direction quickly when one result becomes usable. That is true in many investigations, but saying that responsibly requires discipline. It means emphasizing possibility, not certainty. It means saying that the evidence may still produce a meaningful lead, not claiming that it already has. It means preserving suspense without crossing into unsupported prediction. Another important part of this case is the difference between public attention and public knowledge. National attention can make a case feel visible, but visibility is not the same thing as understanding. Viewers may know a handful of major facts and still not know the most important thing. In this case, the public knows that Nancy Guthrie disappeared under deeply concerning circumstances. The public knows there was reported camera interference. The public knows there were troubling signs at the home. The public knows law enforcement believes she was taken against her will. The public knows investigators are working with DNA and have reportedly turned to forensic genetic genealogy. But the public does not know who is responsible, and the public does not know how all of the evidence fits together inside the investigation. That gap between visibility and understanding is one of the reasons the story has stayed so compelling. It also explains why careful language matters when discussing Nancy's family. Savannah Guthrie publicly addressed speculation and pushed back on the idea that one of Nancy's children would have harmed her. CBS reported that the sheriff's department said Savannah, her siblings, and their spouses had been cleared as suspects. In a high-profile case, that is not a minor detail. It is a clear reminder that public suspicion can move far beyond what the evidence supports. Responsible coverage has to respect official boundaries. That means not turning unresolved questions into accusations. It means not hinting at guilt because silence feels suspicious. It means remembering that viewers are not just consuming a mystery. They are hearing a story about real people whose lives have already been damaged by an ongoing crisis. One of the reasons the Nancy Guthrie case feels so unsettling is that several of the public facts pull in the same direction without yet delivering a public conclusion. The reported timeline suggests a narrow overnight window. The released footage suggests concerning activity at the home. The family's description of the scene suggests the disappearance was not ordinary. Authorities say Nancy was taken against her will. Blood at the home was later reported to be Nancy's. And yet, no suspect has been publicly identified. That combination creates a kind of emotional friction. It tells the audience something serious happened. It tells the audience investigators have evidence. But it withholds the one thing people naturally expect evidence to produce. That is exactly why the forensic side of the case now feels so central. If public clues have not yet produced public identity, then science may be one of the main paths left to narrow the unknowns. And still, it is important not to oversell science in a way that becomes misleading. Genetic genealogy is powerful, but it is not infallible. It can guide investigators. It can narrow possibilities. It can create a path where none seemed obvious before. But it still has to be combined with the rest of the case. If a lead emerges, that lead still has to fit timeline, access, geography, and other evidence. That is why good investigative work is layered. One clue does not replace all the others. It interacts with them. A DNA lead can become meaningful because it helps make sense of surveillance, or because it fits a pattern in digital records, or because it clarifies who had a connection to a location. The strength of a case often comes not from one dramatic discovery, but from multiple pieces aligning at the same time. That is also why patience matters, even when patience feels unbearable. For Nancy's family, every day without certainty is painful. For the public, every day without movement can feel frustrating. But the reason advanced forensic work is worth waiting for is that when it does produce something reliable, it can change the case in a way speculation never can. Speculation creates noise. Reliable evidence creates direction. That distinction is everything. In a case with national visibility, rumor can spread faster than fact. That makes fact more valuable, not less. It means the public may hear many theories before investigators ever release another major update. But theories are not the case. The case is the evidence, the timeline, the official statements, and the work still being done behind the scenes. There is another important lesson in the way this story has developed. The public often imagines that if a case has surveillance footage, physical evidence, and national coverage, the answer should arrive quickly. But some of the most difficult cases are exactly the ones that seem easiest from far away. A camera image may show activity without revealing identity. A sample may exist without being ready for immediate comparison. A timeline may be compelling without identifying who moved through it. A family's public profile may bring attention without bringing answers. In other words, the elements that make a case feel visible do not always make it simple. Sometimes they only make the unknowns more obvious. That is why the DNA development has such a strong hold on people. It feels like the place where anonymity might finally begin to weaken. If investigators can move from an unknown sample to a stronger profile, from a stronger profile to a family connection, and from a family connection to a credible lead, then the case changes shape. Yet not because that would automatically solve everything, but because it would move the investigation from abstraction toward identification. An unknown profile is a mystery. A probable person is a direction, and direction matters. It allows investigators to ask more focused questions, test more specific possibilities, and evaluate whether new or existing evidence supports the same path. All of this can be said without stepping outside the official record, and that is exactly why it is the safest approach for monetization and for credibility. You do not need to promise the audience that a breakthrough is guaranteed. You do not need to dramatize the case with graphic imagery or accusatory language. You do not need to imply that silence itself proves something sinister. The known facts already carry more than enough emotional and narrative weight. A vulnerable adult remains missing. Authorities believe she was taken against her will. The family has made repeated public appeals. Investigators have not publicly named a suspect. DNA evidence is being pursued through advanced methods. That is enough to sustain serious, high-retention storytelling when the script is written with clarity and restraint. And that restraint matters not only for YouTube policy, but for the long-term credibility of a channel. YouTube's monetization rules do not just consider sensitive content. They also emphasize original, authentic value. A channel that relies on repeated shock framing, vague recycled scripts, or sensational speculation can run into problems even if no single sentence obviously breaks a rule. But a channel that adds genuine narration, careful structure, responsible analysis, and documentary context is in a much stronger position. That is especially true in true crime, where audience trust is part of the product. If viewers learn that a channel stays factual, avoids reckless claims, and still delivers tension and clarity, that trust becomes one of the most valuable things the channel has. What keeps this case alive in the minds of viewers is not only fear. It is the sense that the investigation may still be moving toward a point where the evidence becomes more precise than the public conversation around it. That is an important difference. Public conversation often expands. It multiplies theories. It introduces assumptions. It reacts emotionally to each new headline. Evidence, by contrast, should narrow. It should eliminate wrong paths. It should strengthen the paths that fit. And if forensic genetic genealogy is helping investigators work toward that narrowing process, then this stage of the case may matter enormously, even if it does not look dramatic from the outside. There is something else worth recognizing here. In many cases, the most difficult moment for the public is not the beginning. It is the middle. At the beginning, the urgency is clear and attention is high. At the end, there is usually some form of resolution. But in the middle, there is waiting. There is incomplete information. There are repeated questions and not enough verified answers. That is where the Nancy Guthrie case is now. It is in the middle. And the middle is where responsible storytelling has the hardest job. It has to hold the audience's attention without inventing certainty. It has to preserve seriousness without becoming exploitative. It has to remain emotionally engaging without losing factual discipline. That is why ad-safe storytelling in true crime is not about draining the case of emotion. It is about channeling that emotion through what can actually be supported. So if the goal is to make this topic as safe as possible for monetization while still keeping it compelling, the best approach is straightforward. Keep the focus on verified facts. Frame the story as documentary reporting and investigation, not accusation. Avoid graphic words and images. Avoid loaded claims about motive. Avoid titles and thumbnails that present speculation as truth. Keep reminding the audience where the public record ends. And where there is uncertainty, say so clearly. That approach is not only safer under YouTube's advertiser-friendly standards, it is also stronger storytelling because it lets the suspense come from the real state of the case instead of from exaggerated language. At the center of everything is still the same simple fact. Nancy Guthrie is missing. The family still does not have the answers it needs. Investigators are still working the case. The public still does not have a named suspect. DNA evidence is still being analyzed, and forensic genetic genealogy has reportedly become one of the methods being used to try to move the case forward. Those facts are enough to explain why this story still matters, why people are still watching it, and why the next credible development could have an enormous impact. Until that development arrives, the responsible way to tell the story is to stay with what is verified, follow the official record closely, and let the weight of the real investigation speak for itself. If you want the strongest version of this for monetization, the safest path is not to make the script louder. It is to make it cleaner. Cleaner wording, cleaner claims, cleaner structure, less emphasis on shock, more emphasis on timeline, verified reporting, and process. That is how you get closer to a 9 out of 10 monetization-safe version for this topic. Not by stripping away all tension, but by making sure the tension comes from what has been officially reported and from what the audience can responsibly infer from the state of the investigation. And in the Nancy Guthrie case, that is more than enough. Because even without exaggeration, this remains one of the most closely watched unresolved investigations in the country, and the next reliable answer, whenever it comes, could change the entire public understanding of what happened.